Today's story is about a haunting experience that took place in a deep forest in Phrae Province. Simon's group went into the forest to hunt. This time, they intended to venture deeper than usual. Little did they know, they would encounter a series of mysterious events that forced them to decide to leave the forest on the first night. Before we dive into our scary story, we would like to ask everyone to like and subscribe to support us in continuing to bring you more terrifying tales in the future. The entire event traces back to around the year 1989, when Simon was exactly 15 years old. At that time, the village where Simon lived was extremely remote and could be described as underdeveloped. He resided in a district of Phrae Province, with his village bordering the Mayam forest. The main occupation of the people in that area was agriculture, supplemented by foraging in the forest to sell. Therefore, everyone in the village held the Mayam forest in high regard. Not only did this forest sustain hundreds of lives in the community, but the villagers also believed that the forest was alive and inhabited by numerous mysterious entities. There were many stories passed down from generation to generation, making this forest a place of significant reverence and supernatural aura, earning the utmost respect from everyone in the village. At that time, Simon's father, named Samuel, was the chief hunter of the village. The villagers revered Samuel for his extensive knowledge of magic and his vast experience navigating the Mayam forest. Being Samuel's only son, Simon was regularly taught the skills and knowledge of a hunter. Consequently, Simon often accompanied Samuel into the forest. The Mayam forest is vast and expansive. The villagers know well the boundaries within which they should forage and understand that they should not venture into the deeper parts of the forest. Those who wish to hunt large game must travel further into the forest, and naturally, the deeper one goes, the greater the dangers become. One day, Samuel, Simon, and two other hunters agreed on a date and time to go hunting for large game in the deeper parts of the forest. This journey would require them to travel far and spend approximately 2 nights in the forest. Such excursions into the deep forest were rare. It was during this particular occasion that Samuel, for the first time, allowed Simon to join them on the journey into the deep forest. Simon was extremely excited about the prospect of spending the night in the forest for the first time. On the day of the journey, everyone gathered together. Samuel led them to the edge of the forest at dawn. They began their trek into the forest just as the sun was rising. Samuel taught Simon that this time of day was the best for entering the deeper parts of the forest. They had been traveling for about 4 hours when Samuel signaled for everyone to take a break. Simon was extremely relieved to hear this because continuous trekking for 4 hours was exhausting. They sat down to eat amidst the dense forest, surrounded by the sounds of birds and insects. After finishing their meal, they rested and chatted, waiting for their food to digest. Suddenly, one of the hunters called out Simon's name in the middle of the forest. Everyone turned to look at the hunter with expressions that seemed to convey that he had made a mistake. From what Simon knew, one of the customs of entering the forest in that area was that calling someone by name was forbidden, especially at night. Fortunately, it was still morning, so no one panicked too much. They sat there for about 20 minutes before continuing their journey. Samuel led the way, with Simon following closely behind, while the other 2 hunters brought up the rear. By around 3 in the afternoon, they reached the edge of the forest area where the villagers usually foraged. Ahead of them lay the deeper parts of the forest. At that point, Samuel instructed everyone to stop and led them in a ritual to ask for forgiveness and permission from the forest spirits and guardians before entering the deeper woods. As they were performing the ritual, a strange event occurred. The forest, which had been filled with the sounds of birds and insects, suddenly fell silent. It was as if every living creature in the forest had simultaneously stopped making noise. The silence was so profound that they could hear their own breathing. Everyone exchanged puzzled looks, but Simon noticed that Samuel kept his eyes closed and continued chanting his prayers. Once the ritual was completed, the sounds of the forest returned as abruptly as they had ceased, as if someone had turned the volume back on. Samuel then sternly warned everyone, "From here on, we must proceed with caution. Do not call each other by name, do not stray from the group, and keep no more than 3 paces apart. Unless necessary, refrain from talking." With these instructions, they continued their journey into the deep forest, moving carefully and silently. After about 2 more hours of walking, Samuel signaled for everyone to stop. It was time to set up their campsite for the night. They found a simple spot near a small stream where they could make a shelter. Samuel and the other 2 hunters worked together to build the shelter, while Simon was tasked with gathering firewood from the nearby area. As Simon was collecting firewood, he suddenly heard a woman's voice calling his name from behind him. Instinctively, he turned around to look but saw no one there. At that moment, he was profoundly shocked because he knew that there were no women in their group. Only men had ventured into the forest this time. So, whose voice could it have been? Simon managed to regain his composure and slowly walked back to the campsite, consciously trying not to run. When he reached the campsite, the first thing he did was approach his father. At that moment, it seemed as if Samuel could read Simon's expression. Before Samuel could ask what had happened, Simon recounted the unsettling incident he had just experienced. After hearing the whole story, Samuel's face grew tense. He called the other 2 hunters over to discuss the situation, as he believed this might be a warning sign of danger for the entire group. Everyone agreed that they should leave the forest as quickly as possible, considering what Simon encountered to be a bad omen. However, the sun was already beginning to set, and it would soon be dark. Traveling through the forest at night was extremely dangerous, so they reluctantly decided to spend the night at their current location and head back at first light. As darkness enveloped every inch of the forest, the atmosphere changed dramatically. The lively forest of the daytime transformed into a dark, silent expanse, save for the sounds of insects and nocturnal animals. Everyone sat close to the campfire, with Simon feeling an inexplicable sense of fear due to the eerie surroundings. At that time, the light from the campfire was the only thing anchoring their spirits, preventing them from succumbing to fear. By around 8 p.m., Samuel instructed everyone to climb up to the tree platform to rest. They decided to take turns keeping watch, with each person standing guard for 2 hours. Samuel took the 3rd watch, while the group agreed that Simon, being young, would not stand guard. Exhausted from the day's journey, Simon soon fell asleep. While Simon slept, he dreamt of a woman. She appeared to be middle-aged, dressed in tattered, old white clothes. However, her appearance was far from ordinary. She had an emaciated figure with disproportionately long arms and legs. Her eye sockets were deeply recessed, her eyes a blood-red color, and her mouth stretched wide, almost reaching her ears. Her hair was disheveled and wild. The dream felt disturbingly real, and Simon could sense an overwhelming malevolent presence from the woman. In his dream, Simon was terrified as the woman repeatedly called his name while leaping and climbing around him on the trees. He was paralyzed with fear and didn't know what to do. Suddenly, a bright light appeared in the dream. When the light emerged, the woman let out a wail of pain and ran away. The light then slowly moved towards Simon. He felt the light's brightness growing until it woke him up from the dream. When he awoke, he found himself drenched in sweat, despite the cold night air in the forest. He awoke just as Samuel was keeping watch. Simon immediately recounted his dream to Samuel. Hearing this, Samuel's expression turned deeply worried. He knew that such a vivid and disturbing dream, especially with the details Simon described, was not a good sign. Simon watched as his father took a ceremonial knife from his bag, holding it between his hands, while he recited an incantation that Simon couldn't understand. After finishing the chant, Samuel gripped the knife tightly and swung it forcefully in the air in a cross pattern. Immediately, something Simon had never expected occurred. The moment Samuel slashed the air, a chilling, agonizing wail echoed through the forest. The terrifying part was that the scream matched the voice of the woman from Simon's dream. The sound was so loud that it woke the other two hunters from their sleep. Samuel, too, looked stunned by the eerie wail. After the scream subsided, they all heard something jumping around in the treetops above their makeshift shelter. The fear was palpable among them. Even Samuel, the experienced hunter, showed signs of distress. Simon was utterly terrified, almost wetting himself, as this was his first time spending the night in the forest. The situation became dire, with everyone on edge, listening intently to the unsettling sounds above. The previously serene forest now felt ominously alive with an unseen presence. Samuel and one of the other hunters shone their flashlights up into the trees, directing the beams toward the source of the sounds. When the light finally fell upon the strange figure perched in the branches, everyone was stunned into silence. The figure was exactly as Simon had described from his dream. A woman with an emaciated body, disproportionately long arms and legs, deep-set eyes that glowed red, and wild, disheveled hair. Moreover, her body bore wounds as if slashed by a sharp object. Recognizing the immediate danger, Samuel didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle to his shoulder and fired a shot directly at the creature. They all saw the creature fall from the tree, hitting the ground with a loud thud. Samuel quickly directed his flashlight to the spot where they expected it to have fallen. However, when the light illuminated the area, there was nothing there, only empty ground. At that moment, fear gripped everyone. Samuel and the other hunters raised their rifles, scanning the surroundings with their flashlights, ready for anything. They stayed on high alert for a long time, tension palpable in the air. Eventually, as the minutes passed without further incident, they began to lower their rifles. One of the hunters broke the silence, asking Samuel what the creature they saw might have been. Samuel admitted that he didn't know. Despite his lifelong experience as a hunter, he had never encountered anything like it before. This revelation did little to comfort the group, but they knew they had to remain vigilant until morning. That night, no one dared to sleep. They were still in a state of paranoia from what they had encountered, fearing it might come back to harm them again. They forced themselves to stay awake until dawn. The first light of the sun hitting the forest helped calm Simon's group. At that moment, Samuel wasted no time. He ordered everyone to pack up and immediately set off back the way they had come. Samuel, leading the way as before, guided them back along the same path they had originally taken. After about 4 to 5 hours of walking, Samuel told everyone to sit down and rest. Simon noticed that Samuel's face looked unusual. Before he could ask what was wrong, everyone felt their hearts drop when Samuel uttered a sentence. "I think we might be lost," Samuel continued, saying he was sure he knew the way back, but it seemed like they were going in circles. Moreover, the traces they had left when they first entered were almost gone. Everyone's eyes at that moment looked utterly hopeless. Simon could only think of the deities he revered in his heart and pray that they would get through this crisis safely. But as they sat there resting in despair, after a while, one of the hunters smelled smoke. He told everyone that he smelled smoke, and when they all tried to sniff the air, they could indeed smell it. Samuel then decided to lead everyone in the direction of the smoke, suggesting that it might be another group of hunters who had come to forage in the forest like they did and had built a fire. They followed the scent for about 200 meters and found a Buddhist monk meditating under a bamboo grove. Seeing the monk filled them with great relief and joy. Samuel told everyone to go pay their respects to him. The monk appeared to be young and handsome, with a clean and radiant complexion. Simon watched as Samuel approached the monk, raised his hands in a respectful Y and said, "Greetings, venerable brother." The monk looked at them for a moment and then said, "May you be blessed. Is there anything I can help you with?" His words seemed to reflect an understanding of the worries in Simon's group's hearts. Samuel then straightforwardly told him that they were lost in the forest. The monk was silent for a moment before responding, "Then stay with me for the night. If you continue your journey now, it will be dark before you find your way out. This forest is very dangerous at night." Hearing this, Samuel began to recount the events of the previous night to the monk. They learned from the monk that what they had encountered the previous night was a forest spirit known as the Komat. The Komat is a dangerous entity. It causes those who enter the forest to become lost and will not allow them to leave until their time has come. The monk explained that escaping from these spirits is not easy because they will follow their target until the person meets their end. Otherwise, the only way to escape is to get out of their territory. Hearing this, the group felt both fear and despair. However, the monk reassured them not to worry and promised to lead them out of the forest the next day. He advised them to stay with him for the night. Everyone agreed to spend the night with the monk. Afterward, they made a temporary camp with the monk. Each person gathered a lot of firewood, not wanting to be surrounded by darkness that night. And then the time they dreaded arrived. When the sun set, darkness once again enveloped the forest. The same eerie atmosphere returned, but this night they felt more at ease with the monk's presence. The monk remained in meditation within his small tent, while Simon's group did not dare to sleep. However, due to the exhaustion from the previous sleepless night, Simon eventually dozed off. He didn't know how long he had slept before he woke with a start. He heard someone calling his name again, a voice he remembered all too well. As Simon woke up, he saw everyone in the group aiming their guns at the treetops. Samuel was telling everyone that it had come back. Suddenly, a woman's laughter echoed loudly throughout the area, sending chills down Simon's spine. The mysterious female voice spoke, "Do you think this bald can save you?" Samuel shone his flashlight up and down the treetops but couldn't find anything. After a while, the voice disappeared and silence returned. When Simon looked towards the monk, he saw that he was still meditating in his small tent, undisturbed. Samuel hurriedly approached the monk and said, "That's what we encountered last night, Venerable." However, the monk did not respond and continued his meditation. Seeing this, Samuel decided not to disturb him and let him continue meditating. Simon sensed that everyone was very scared, so they all moved closer to the monk's tent. As time passed, Those who had been forcing themselves to stay awake began to doze off one by one. Just as they were about to drift into sleep, the bamboo forest in front of them started to shake again. Peering into the darkness, they could see something that resembled a tall figure, about 3 meters high. The mysterious figure slowly emerged, parting the bamboo as it moved towards Simon's group. It gradually revealed itself to be the same forest spirit, the Komat, that Samuel had shot at the night before. Everyone gasped in shock. Simon, terrified, crawled into the monk's tent. He heard the Komat's menacing voice, "I will make sure all of you die." It moved towards them, hunched over, until it was less than 20 meters away. Simon peeked out from inside the tent and saw his father and 2 other hunters furiously firing their guns at the Komat. However, the bullets seemed to pass right through its body without affecting it at all. At that moment, Simon noticed that the monk had raised his hands in prayer and was chanting something before stepping out of his small tent. The monk addressed the entity before them, saying, "What you are doing is bringing harm to others, creating karma for yourself. You should let go of your vengeance and malevolence. Do not seek revenge against those who are unaware. Your actions will only bind you to your own suffering." As the monk finished speaking, the malevolent spirit froze and then gradually faded away before their eyes. The sense of relief was overwhelming, and everyone immediately bowed to the monk in gratitude. The monk reassured them, "You are safe now." The comfort brought by the monk's words allowed them to finally fall asleep that night. When they awoke the next morning, they were astonished to find that their surroundings no longer resembled the forest they had seen the night before. Additionally, the monk's small tent, which had been close to where they had slept, was now empty, and the monk was nowhere to be found. They searched the area for a while but found no trace of the monk. Despite their thorough search, it was as if the monk had vanished without a trace. Samuel then told everyone to pack up and continue their journey. It didn't take long before Samuel excitedly shouted that he had found the way out. He led the group for less than 50 meters, and they emerged at the edge of the forest, entering an area commonly used for foraging. Each person raised their hands in a prayer-like gesture, as if giving thanks to the divine, including the monk who had helped them survive. Samuel wasted no time and instructed everyone to continue their journey immediately. After walking for about 4 more hours, they reached the village. Upon reaching the village outskirts, Samuel suggested that everyone should visit the local temple first to have the abbot perform a water blessing ritual to cleanse them of any bad spirits before returning home. After the abbot blessed them with holy water, Samuel recounted the events they had experienced in the forest. Hearing about the meditating monk in the forest, the abbot's eyes widened with interest. He then told them a story from when he was a novice monk. There had been a monk who came from another place and stayed in their village before venturing into the Mayam forest alone on a meditation journey. That monk never returned. The villagers had searched for him for many days, including the veteran hunters of that time, but they never found him. It was presumed that the monk had gotten lost in the forest and was never seen again. When Samuel asked the abbot about the appearance of the missing monk, the abbot described him as a young monk with a good complexion, matching the description of the monk Samuel's group had encountered in every detail. This revelation sent chills down everyone's spines.